Okay, here we go again. So now what's remaining is the main logic, the core of the project. I will briefly explain the purpose of main files versus presenter files right now. Okay, so let's start with the easiest one of them. For the main Stdio file, this file aims to process inputs from standard input, which is the terminal over here, and generate answers using a specified LLM model, which is Ansari agent. Okay, there is literally nothing to explain here, just imports and then the logger that I previously explained, and then we get an instance of the class of Ansari, the agent, which uses the OpenAI model, which I will explain this file a little bit later, and passes this agent to the presenter class, which will present this. Present here means that, okay, so the main difference is this. The main logic is the entry point, file. So when we want to run this project, where do we go? What do we run? We run these main files. So we want to run the main file where the output channel, is the stdio, is the terminal. Then we run the script. Okay, we say in the terminal Python space main stdio.py. Okay, and we run it. And then this class is responsible for presenting, the way that it will run in here. Okay, so let's see that. If you go here, you will see this function is a function responsible for presenting. It has the following: self.agent to greet is just a greeting message. I think actually you can see it's binded with greeting here, which I believe is a file that we have. If we say here greeting to text, it will say this: Assalamu alaikum, my name is Ansari, I can help you with etc, etc, etc. So it just prints that in the terminal, and then this bigger than, indicating that the user can type here the prompt that he wants to type. And then it's an input variable. Let's say the user asks in the terminal, who are you? Then this will be stored in this variable. And while this variable is true, because it will, when the model finishes answering, we can take the input again. So we will stop here, and then when we enter, okay, I understand, hope you have a great day, then this will be a new line and it will continue the while loop. So this is understandable. But this part, the for loop part, I can explain this a little bit. And I actually can make this its own chapter. Okay, 246. 246. Yeah. Okay. So this part basically says the following. We say the following here. Let's suppose that the AI model answers with, I am Ansari. Wait, because this actually, yeah, this here. Okay, he'll say, I am Ansari, I do 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, that's actually a bad example because he already says that in the greeting. Okay, let's give another example. What is your purpose? The user asks, what is your purpose? And then they answer, my purpose is to blah, blah, blah. Okay, so in that string won't be obtained here in a single call, but rather in multiple calls, in a streamed way. So we will first get, when calling this function, the word I am, and then the word Ansari, and then the word responsible, and then the word for, and then etc. So how is this done? It's done because this process input function or method is actually a generator. Okay, it yields a generator. So a generator in Python basically means, yeah, I'm not sure if this is exact or not, but basically it's like a function that when you call in a certain way, you will get the next instance of its response value, of its return value. So since we normally in any Python function, you have given a function and given some inputs, you get an output, like a return value. Here, it's not exactly this. It's basically you give it an input and then it exhaustively returns values. So it returns an initial value, and then when you call it again, it returns another value, and then when you call it again, it returns another value, until its inner list or whatever gets exhausted. And now we can say that it generated all of its possible return values. And so that's why we name it yields instead of returns. Yield. So we say here yield as in Y-I-E-L-D, yield, okay? So I will go through the code of this, only this, because it is worth going through. Okay, bear with me. Let's go to this function and see what it does. It returns another function. Great. Let's see this returned function. Okay. You'll see that this also returns the generator. So it just returns the generator, which is returned from here. And now I expect here to see a yield statement. Here it is. So basically, in this try catch, while something is being, whilst whatever is being set true, we will yield these values. Okay, we will yield these values. This also returns yielded values. Process one round. You will see here if you go below, in this part, we yield delta.content. So basically, what this is when we get the response, okay, the response from here, when we get the response from the AI model, from LM model, from OpenAI or whatever, it is not received as a single string. It's received in streams, because you see here stream equal true. Okay, so what that means is when we receive the response, we can see custom stream wrapper. Okay, so we can iterate on that. That's the meaning of streaming. So when we iterate on that, you see that chunk here could refer to a word, for example. So if the model returns something like I am Ansari, how can I help? Initially, it returns I, and then, for example, am, and notice here the space over here. Okay, so this is all of this is returned one by one by the model. That's why you'll see later that we just concatenate these strings without adding a space or anything in the middle. Okay, and then you can see spaces like these. Okay, and maybe a question mark or maybe a stiff in the end. Anyways, so each of one of these is a chunk. Okay, and then from a chunk it has multiple attributes, and then we get the content attribute from it, and then we yield that. So yield here means the following: means that when I reach this point right here, this function returns this value for now. Okay, and this part, which is called process one round, returns for now I am. Okay, the word I am, this chunk, and then this process message history function that you see here returns in this part I am, which process inputs returns in here I am, and that's the word that we use over here if it's not none, because I'm not sure, I think sometimes the returned chunks are none or have a none value depending on the type of chunk returned, but I think this is an extra check. This should not be never true. Is that how do I say it? This shouldn't be false ever, I think. Okay, but we just do it as a validation check. So if the word has anything in it, like I am or whatever, it's not none, it's a string, then we write it out. Okay, and then we flush the terminal. Flush doesn't mean we clear it out, it's just something internal in the memory. Anyways, so this gives a typewriter effect. So when you ask in the terminal, for example, who are you? Okay, and then you will see that the answer, instead of just a bulk of message coming up in 1 second, no, it will be I am, and then I'm sorry, and then I intended to, whatever, and you will have milliseconds of gap difference. That's a streaming effect, the typewriter effect. That's because it's internally here, just going through each word one by one. Okay, so yeah, this is the logic of this. Hopefully now understand just how words are processed and are sent. This logic will continue with us. So hopefully you understood that. Where am I? Okay, I finished this. Now back to presenting. Rest of the presenting logics. Okay, so for other presenter classes, like file, sorry, you also have a way to present. So if you look at its main file, you will see, okay, I will explain that in a minute, but basically this is the entry point for the main file in which we want to output stuff or input stuff from and to files instead of the terminal. Okay, so there we also present. How do we present, i.e. how do we write to these files using the file presenter? Okay, so it opens here and then it reads lines, this is the input, and then send each line to agent and get result. Read line from it. Literally the comment says it all. So presenting here doesn't necessarily mean just presenting as an output. It means output and input. Just presenting, like how are we presented to the user who wants to activate this functionality. Okay, so we say to him, give us input in this way, and we tell him that we will give you the output in that way. That's why in the Stdio presenter, we also take input. Like we don't just present the output, we take input as well. Okay, so This also is pretty straightforward. I don't need to go through it. The only remark here is that this part is similar to the one before, but you see here a comprehensive list instead of a for loop like in the previous one, a full-on for loop. The reason for this is because we don't need to do any processing in the middle. Like here, we want to write this in the middle. We want to write this command in the middle. But here, we're going to paste into a file. Why do I want to have a typewriter effect when I'm just pasting into a file? So I just iterate to get all of the words in a list as strings, and then join all of these strings together without any space, because remember, the OpenAI model returns the space in the text itself. And then you have a single string representing the answer of the model, and then that answer you just put it in the output file. That's it. Okay. That logic is consistent. Like that logic will return to us in Discord and in WhatsApp. Okay. This is also something to be aware of. I think none here, I was mistaken when I said that this will never apply, because apparently, because I'm not the one who initially put this logic, I believe that occasionally it does actually send a none to its answer instead of a string. This is just a validation check for here. So interesting. Anyways, that's regarding this presenter. And for other presenters, the API and the SAP, I'll leave that for later. The AI file presenter, to be honest, I didn't work on that. I'm not exactly sure how it goes. Neither did I work on most of what I explained here, but at least I interacted with that code. But this code, to be honest, I didn't really see it in depth. But if we actually see our trusted friend outline, Mr. Outline over here, and we see the present function, we'll see that it basically outputs to a file as well, or to a CSV actually. So you see here the reader CSV. And so at least we know that whatever this file does, its way of presenting is using CSVs. Okay. Yeah, until it writes the rows and continues until it finally writes the CSV. And I don't know if this actually points to something that we set or not. Put file. Yeah, we set that in the terminal. Okay, great. I'll explain that in a second. But yeah, basically AI file presenter is just a way to also present to a file. Okay, like it presents to a file, but with extra parameters. Okay, so now we have two logics. Okay, the logic of just a file presenter, just regular. This is the equivalent of the SDIO presenter, but just for file instead of a terminal. And then AI file presenter, which is also presenting to files, like, or to CSV rather, but with a catch, like with certain settings changed. So how do we adjust for this, or when do we run this, or when do we run that? I believe both of them is based on main file. So we run either file presenter or AI file presenter from the main file. Okay, so I am now finished with the presenter explanations. The graduated presenter, we don't use that anymore actually. So this we abandoned that logic because it takes up a lot of big size when we try to run the pipeline of GitHub Actions. So we neglected, we just abandoned implementing a UI for Gradio. We don't need to test that on that anyways. So that code is actually, yeah, I think we could delete that code now. And Discord presenter, the same thing, but if you know the API of Discord, then you understand this. Like I don't need to explain what is message.author or what is message.content or mentions. Like this, if you look at the API on the website of Discord, you understand it. So I don't think there is anything that needs to be explicitly said here. It can be understood from the code. So yeah, the WhatsApp presenter and the API I'll leave at the end. So I'm now finished with presenters. Regarding the main file that I was talking about, I just wanna state that I'm done with presenters and go ahead with the main files. Okay, so for here, how do we run either AI file presenter or file presenter? Using a class called Typer. It's a cool library called Typer. Yeah, Typer, build great CLIs, easy to code based on Python typings. So as it says, instead of using the boilerplate Python code, which I can't remember the syntax, like just can't remember, it's like long lines of saying, yeah, we want to read an argument X from user where its help string is etc. and its default value is whatever. Instead of all of that syntax, its syntax now is similar to Python, where you just define a function. We called it main here. We say its parameters. We type hint each parameter, like we say that this we expect it to be a string, etc. And we potentially add as a default value this Typer object called button, okay, or function actually, which basically says what we were supposed to say in the boiler code below. For example, if we now run this script from the command line and we don't pass any arguments, then you assume that this argument called IAMode is set to its default value, which is false. Okay, but how do I call this argument? By using this IAMode, written like that. And what is its shortcut is this. I think you understand now. And what if you write -h to get help for this file? You will get this explanation for this parameter. So it's a very clean way to write this interfacing, and you can see more about the details here. And I explained the overall logic from this. The aims to process an input file and generate answers. It's this part, and specifically this part, can help you out with that link and understanding the syntax of this library. Okay, so don't get confused about all of this. Is literally just parameters. Like literally, if you press this button here to just collapse the option definitions, you'll see that literally these are just parameters to the main function. It's nothing else. Okay, and so this gives us a little bit of flexibility to change certain parameters when running this script, unlike what we're doing in the normal presenter class. And what we're doing normally in the main SDIO, we just run the script and then we have the Ansari LLM ready for us, and then we ask and then it answers. That's it. But here we can set arguments that will help us out. You can search for these arguments and its usage. Most of them go to the IAMode presenter. So if we set the IAMode argument to true, right? I think to true. Yeah, to true, because it's a boolean. Then we will run this. Okay, we will run this IA file presenter class. Else we will run the normal file presenter. So I think it's pretty straightforward what's happening here. Regarding what IA file does, I think it runs logic related to the Ansari workflow, which I'll explain later. So it's for testing specific things in Ansari. But if you don't want to test that pipeline, you can just run the normal, like the default mode, make IAMode equal false when running in the terminal. Okay, so this is regarding the main file. Main SDIO already explained it. Main Discord, it's literally the same as main SDIO. We just get the agent of Ansari and then present that. Obviously with any credentials related to Discord, like the Discord token, etc. But nothing special. It's just the same logic.